My name is Brian Funk here with Session Board, and this is a masterclass in post-event content syndication. And I think that you will see that the content syndication is a little bit of a Trojan horse into a broader scope around how to build an evangelized audience and to create deep connection and amazing experiences. But how we syndicate and use our content is a huge piece of that. And I'm so thrilled to be joined by my dear friends and past and present collaborators with the We Are for Good team. We have actually brought events and sessions and experiences to life together. So I have had, in that capacity, a front row seat to their brilliance and their masterful art in how they curate content, how they build up speakers, how they engage an audience, and how they use that content to have an impact that includes over 600,000 podcast downloads, building an online community with educational content and year-round engagement. They're doing incredible, incredible work. And on top of it, I think they're the kindest, most big-hearted, soulful people that I've had the privilege to know. So this is going to be a lot of fun. We are in for a treat. Of course, we do this every single week. We have live conversations with event content experts. Our hope and intention is that we are helping event marketing teams build better events and experiences. And we're also uplifting the voices and the people that are living out and doing incredible work. So it's my privilege to now welcome you all to the We Are for Good team. What's up, guys?
Oh my
Hi.
gosh, what an
So good to
intro,
be here.
Brian. Thank you for having
Trying.
us.
Hey, friends. Good to see ya.
Thanks for
So
being
many
here.
lovely humans here.
Oh, I'm already syndicating. We'll get into that. That'll be fun.
Yeah, immediately what I thought.
First
You're
dad
planting
So
the
joke right out of the
seeds.
gate.
It's true.
So as we kick off, let's just like kind of set the stage. If you all could just go around, just tell us a little bit about who you are, but if you could also tell us about all of the facets of We Are for Good, would love to just, bring the audience into what you do and how you curate content and experiences. But also we want to know who you are as people. So who's going first? Becky, I'm putting you
All
in the hot
right.
seat.
Hi. It's so not I got pointed at. So, which I always say the pointing emoji is the most aggressive of all the emojis. But hey, y'all, it's so good to meet you. I'm Becky Endicott. I'm co-founder and chief storyteller at We Are for Good. Started my career at the happiest place on earth in Oklahoma City, which is the Science Museum, Oklahoma. Moved to higher ed and healthcare and just found these two incredible humans along the way who just did not see the work of philanthropy and impact. We just didn't see it the same way as the rest of the world. And we thought there could be a different way that we could engage with communities, that we could activate around generosity. And so John had this very disruptive idea that we could take what we know and start a bigger conversation. We launched We Are for Good with a podcast at the height of the pandemic in August 2020. Our parents thought we had lost our minds and we had left our healthcare philanthropy jobs and just started a conversation, and it just sort of took off. And so we show up in lots of different venues, from podcasting to events to virtual summits. And what we're really trying to do is to curate an impact uprising. We believe the act of generosity, getting involved in generosity at any level, changes people. And so we're here to create content, connections, questions, and create an opportunity for people to pour into it any way that's relevant for them. And we believe joy is a vibe, and we're just here to excited to talk to you. So, and I hired John 20 something years ago when he came in with a clip-on tie to the Oklahoma State University Foundation to interview for a graphic design intern job. We've never looked back. And then we found the unicorn, Julie, who's our incredible producer. And I'll just tease that as they introduce themselves.
Oh my gosh, what an intro. Hi, I'm John. I'm a twin dad, double twin dad twice. We're on a family road trip. This is our welcome to our Airstream. We're coming to you live from Utah today. But yeah, I met these two along the journey. Becky and I worked in nonprofit for like 15 years together. And so we came from definitely a space of to revolutionize the world, we need to start from within. And a lot of that is the mindsets and the habits and really having the conversations that we didn't feel like were happening on the main stage. Like, how do we talk about the things? And so we just wanted to create a safe place for that community to happen. And the community around We Are for Good has blown us away. Truly, like we're taken aback. Our value is community is everything. And so everything, every decision we make runs through the lens of like, how can we grow and make a more inclusive, bigger table? Because we feel like that's the only way to change the world is getting more conversations and activity to happen as a result of that. So I'd lift one other thing we've started is, a couple years into our journey, we started to realize we were doing a lot of talking, but how do we really mobilize? And that led us to the decision to chase an idea of creating an impact uprising in a literal form. So we started a quarterly event series. Is the easiest way to describe it is that it's a gathering online during the day, and then at night our community gathers locally in cities around the world. And so we've done two of these now, and thousands of people join us for the virtual event during the day. And then by night, we've had 29 different cities around the world activate and gather people locally to create an impact uprising like it's happening. And change makers are at the heartbeat of it. So honored to be here, excited to talk about our journey, and we're figuring it out along the way. Don't be fooled. Yes.
Totally.
I was just about to say that. And I'm Julie. I'm calling from New York City today. So if anyone's on the East Coast, say hi, please. But yeah, I started my career with John and Becky, which I feel like is a gift in itself. But when I was in college, I had internships at Make-A-Wish and St. Jude. So philanthropy captured me like really early on. I knew I wanted a career in it, thought I would be a fundraiser, started in donor relations with these two guys. And then one day they said, we're going to start a podcast. Could you produce it? So I'm completely self-taught. If anyone's in like the production seat of their shop, please like meet with me, talk with me, because I think a lot of the responses I'll give today is because I'm in that side of our business of just obsessing over our speaker experience, our podcast guest experience, and having a learner's mindset, because these two are the storied fundraisers, but I feel like I found this lane in media production that I really, really love and is married to things that I enjoy. And I danced all growing up. So a fun fact is I used to like mix our pep rally music for our like pep rallies that we would do, our dances. So now I'm editing a podcast. So really everything connects in our world. So it's really fun. I'm grateful for the seat that I'm in. So happy to be here.
But when you
Amazing.
come to
Ju-
Impact Up and the words come up to the beat, that's because Julie is literally laying down the beats in the background. It's so
She's being a
funny.
little humble. She
The-
did perform at a
Yeah,
Super Bowl halftime show, and
she
I
did.
did, and
So-
don't Google it. It's rated one of the worst 10 of all time. But I
That's
did it.
hilarious. That's hilarious.
Black Eyed Peas.
I know.
Oh my gosh.
So
Well,
yeah, I'm sure we'll get into all of that.
Julie is the Wizard of Oz at We Are for Good. And we're
For
drawing
sure.
back the curtain. We're
That's
drawing
right.
back the curtain you're hiding behind today. So
I know. Happy
okay, without further ado, so glad y'all are here. I think to set the stage for everybody here in the prep conversations with John and Julie and Becky, even though I've worked with y'all for years in the event space, I actually never knew until recently about this framework that you all have self-created for yourselves. And so we're going to move through 4 motions in the conversation today. We might go deeper on some more than others, but it's this idea of it's staging, storytelling, syndication, and stoking. Staging is all about getting your audience ready, preparing your community. Storytelling goes into your topic selection, content curation, and panel conversation curation, speaker training. Syndication is actually the ensuring your content lives beyond the moment. And then stoking is how do you flame your content? How do you work within the algorithms? How do you bring a human transformational element to the content you create long term? So those are going to be our 4 motions for today that we'll navigate in and out of to kind of ground you all in what we're going to talk about. And I think before we get into staging, I would just love at a high level for you all just to talk about your ethos around event content and experiences. You've kind of already dabbled there, but I'm just kind of curious if you could maybe go a little deeper on this idea of transformational versus transactional content. and like the results that you've seen as a result of the experiences that you've curated.
Yeah, I'll start and then y'all feel free to hop in here. If you kind of go back to the genesis of why did we even start We Are for Good, and it started as, like we described the podcast, is that we were really feeling like the nonprofit space specifically was grossly underserved in professional development. And if you think about, if you're a growth mindset leader, we need to have scaffolding around us to be able to grow. And some of that is educational content, but it's also peers and community, and it's the books we read, the things we listen to, et cetera. And so much of that was gated off or hard to get to. A lot of my career, and maybe a lot of y'all listening today can relate. Julie was an employee on my team, right? And we didn't have the budget to send any of us to a conference for years. And at the same time, it's like we were young and hungry and wanted to learn and grow, but we felt like the blocks of that. So the genesis of this was like, how do we create a place that is inclusive, that's accessible, that we like remove the threshold to entry as much as possible? So podcast was one way to do that. Anybody can access that around the world. And then secondly, how do you create a space where our value coming through is everyone matters, that everyone feels welcome, that the table is not, I heard Jordana Merkin say this, I don't know if you're here today, that it's not a closed circle, but it's always an open circle, that there's always a seat that you can join us at. And so, again, this was revolting against the machine that it's like only those with the right credentials or the right experience get the stage, get the mic. But like, how do we actually create an inclusive place where people can openly pull up a chair, feel welcomed, and as a result, be surrounded by the growth that they're looking for, surrounded with the ideas and kind of the openness to share the journey. So those are very much like core values of how we show up into it. And then I think we've translated it into different experiences, whether that's through the podcast or through events. But it's all about transformation. It's all about even like how we think about content is always leading toward what is one thing you could do today, because it's like a 1% shift. We can't change the world overnight, but maybe we could start to bend the arc today. And that's what the lens of every conversation, every panel we build is like moving towards some kind of action today that would stack. What did I miss?
I'll just piggyback because I think you set up the ethos really beautifully, but I want to talk about like the activation piece. But the thing I want you to hear, if you hear nothing else, it is the event is not just an event. Your
Mm,
campaign is not just a campaign. Your year-end campaign or your Giving Tuesday efforts are not just the things. And what we're trying to point out is, and this is something we had to learn on our own, in the midst of being sued by Garth Brooks, which is another story that happened earlier in our careers. Our healthcare organization was getting sued. We were all over the national media, and people were like, oh, this healthcare organization clearly exists. And where is the culture of philanthropy? And we ended up taking a really tired gala, and this is just a story to give you some perspective, which had the same script, the same players, it had the same beneficiary, and it had the same invitation list every single year. And we were looking at it. And
Mm,
this is just one example coming off the heels of this major black eye in the media. And it was like, how can this gala not just be the same old thing that this audience is used to? How can we tell a different story? How can we bring people into an experience, setting them up before they ever walk in the door, that they're so excited to hear what we're going to see because we've teased it so well? And then from that event, we take all of the collective joy, insights, enthusiasm, curiosity, and we put it on a different journey and on a lengthier path. And so John mentioned core values, and I'll just say that thinking in a bigger way about the experience is going to help you play the long game with all of the people who are come, whether they are the most influential CEO who is engaging in your organization, down to the tiny Gen Z influencer who may have something to say and to cultivate about the event. So I'll just leave it there and we can dive in. Julie, feel free to jump in too.
Yeah, the only thing I'll add, just again, because I'm on kind of our more behind the scenes production side, is that we didn't know what we didn't know what we didn't know at the beginning. So we really just led from a posture of kindness and gratitude. Our process has not changed since we started 4 years ago, when I was asking my old college professors to come on the podcast, to now we're interviewing some of our like people I've written college essays about, and our process hasn't changed. Like, the 10 minutes before and after a podcast interview, before a panel. We're going to get into all of this today, but just creating that experience of trust and kindness and like deeply being grateful for people's time that they're giving you. It's kind of become a part of our brand. And so I think as like event and content professionals, like it's our job to do that. So I'm sure we'll double click on a lot of that today. But when you're talking experience, my brain immediately went to our kind of behind the scenes experience.
Yeah, and this is helpful. Like I'm gonna plug, I was going back and forth via email with Nelvin, who's actually here today. Hey Nelvin, thanks for joining. And
One of the best.
he had a couple questions, but like one of the things that he talked about was like how with so many choices, right? With so many we're inundated with so many events, experiences, and conferences, like how it's cause for overwhelm. How do we set the stage for something powerful? And I think you have elements that you've already kind of poked at that help create a differentiated experience that tells a new story, but also like you're making sure that your content, your events, your speakers, like I like what you use, Becky, around this idea of stacking, and you make sure that every piece of content that you bring to life actually has a next step. It has a call to action. It has an activation that then takes something from a mic, from a stage, into something beyond the event. And I love the idea of how that sets you apart for something greater, for something different. That I think creates like a space for people to build like deeper, authentic connection, which is something that we're all looking for at events. So you've pulled on some really powerful threads here. And so I'd love to kind of move into your framework. So let's just start with staging. And I'd love you to tee us up on like prior to an event, how do you define staging like in your own world? And then what are some of the tactics and activations that you're doing to start the experience before the event even starts?
Yeah.
Love it. I mean, you're totally poking the bear because we love this aspect of our work. And I got to say, this framework we call the impact arc framework is applicable to anything truly that you're trying to build. We've applied it to campaigns like Becky was alluding to in healthcare, but we've now applied it to every component of We Are for Good also and through events. But staging, for those that are in the fundraising field, this may not be a new concept to you of your silent phase, right? You would never want to launch a capital campaign and announce it to the public and be at $0 raised. It's the most like demotivating thing to do. But the staging is getting your audience ready. And I would think of it as your community, like who is closest to your community. And we don't define that as who gave the most money or who gave the most influence, but who is your believers. And believer is going to look different for everybody, but those are the people that are going to use whatever they have to perpetuate the mission. So you want to include them in your decision-making process or in your next steps. They want to be feeling like insiders. And so staging is really laying the groundwork for what's to come. And they're going to have immediate buy-in because they aren't finding out through three friends later. They're finding out from you that this is coming, and you want their voice in it. You want to have them help you shape it. So in a simplest thing is like, do not launch anything if you have not staged it. Like I think you ask yourself that question because you're going to get so much better results, and the product's going to be so much better if you do the warming sequence really right. Anything to add to that?
I think I'd just say staging is starting at step 0. It's not starting at step 1. It's not starting the day that your event happens. I really appreciated Nelvin's question about it's a noisy, crowded space, and we're all hit with messages and invitations and ways to connect. And I think the things that break through is, how are you telling the story of what's about to come? And how are you sharing it in a way that gives tentacles for people to engage with it, whether they're able to be at the event or whether they're not. And I think that that's an interesting thing to think about. The people who are engaging with your event are not just the people who are in the room. It's the people who are seeing your messages on social. They're seeing your emails. They're getting an invitation. They're watching what happens after the the event? Are you live streaming it? Can they be a part of it when they're not actually in the room? And so setting up ways that we can stage this experience is really going to help you thread people, activities, and action around the entire concept. And its staging is just beginning with the end in mind, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and the only thing
And it's making me think, oh, sorry.
No, you go. You got excited.
Just that, like, make sure you're asking a bigger question. Like what
Yeah.
Becky says, it's not just an event. Event's not just an event. Like you aren't probably just here to create an event. You're trying to create what? A movement. You're trying to fund this thing. Like what is the bigger thing that you're fighting for, and getting clear on that is really important in this step too.
Yeah, it's super important. And we're probably going to get into a lot of like the behind the scenes logistics in a second. So I won't get into that, but like staging perspective of like staging your experience, like from the behind the scenes, we see anyone who's on a panel, even sponsors or podcast guests as like co-creators of the event and the product. So it's also important to just like not leave, don't want to leave them out of the loop. So seeing them as like co-creators of the experience, like they're an important part of that staging experience because they are bringing it to life with you. So I will just add that.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a really important call out because we talked about the idea of like transactional versus transformational, and I think something that you all do really brilliantly that I think we're going to get into is you are looking to sponsors, speakers as co-participants in what you're building, right? It's not just this transactional, like I'm getting this big speaker because of this following and this big name, and this is what it's going to do for the goals that I have for my event, for our business growth, right? You're thinking so much more transformationally and holistically about what does this do for our audience? What does this do for our attendees? Like, how can we provide meaningful value to each other? So there's a lot of layers, I think, to what you're doing around like preparation for the experience. And I think, like we're here around the table and you all joined today because we're here to talk about post content syndication. But I think the post content is wholly dependent on everything that you're doing pre-event. And you all know this. This isn't new news. This isn't rocket science. I'm not like breaking a glass ceiling here. But like what we do pre-event is innately connected to what we're going to do post-event. And so I do think that brings us in nicely into the storytelling component, because I would love to hear like some of the brass tacks on what you're doing because again, I've seen firsthand, like you all create amazing content and you get the right voices and the right people on the right paths around a table for a conversation that I think really elevates the content, the message, and the action step that you're looking for people to take. So I wonder if we could break down storytelling. So we move through staging, we're moving into storytelling. And I think in my mind, this looks at like topic selection, content creation, speaker selection, even speaker training, speaker prep. So, I mean, there's a lot of room for us to play here. So I'm kind of curious, like, behind the scenes, like maybe Julie, you can help us start to pull back the curtain on the production side in terms of how are you helping create great content in the lead up to the event?
Yeah, really big question. I'll try not to talk for 45 minutes. It's exactly what you're saying. Like the syndication is easy when the content is phenomenal, and the content's phenomenal because of how you prepare. And it's like not us creating good content, it's setting the guest or the panelist up to like shine and the
Knock it
way
out
that
of the
they
park.
shine. And so I think we just organically started, obviously, as a podcast. So we got this gift of spending 30 minutes to an hour with amazing people. And we anchored all the podcasts in opening with kind of a more question about like what you did today, their personal story and how they got to where they are. And then we got into the meat of a specific topic that I probably researched for an hour or two. So like we spend a lot of time and care on asking questions that other people maybe wouldn't ask. It's like, it makes me the most happy if someone's like, wow, I've never been asked that before. Like just having that time and care to every single time you have an interaction with someone, You're going deep, you're asking them like, even beforehand, is this a topic that you think is the most valuable right now for you? There's just like so much trust built in agency. And I think we've just like baked that into our whole process. So when we started these Impact Up events, it was like so crystal clear who our partners would be in bringing the content to life. And so I can get into like the brass tacks of our process, but I'll let John and Becky jump in. But like as a whole, like by building trust in the beginning, we now, like you said, have 600 podcast episodes. When you're bringing to life a virtual summit with 15 people, and each of our summits have a very specific topic for each one, because we also think that's really important to go really deep instead of really wide. And so after 600 conversations, it was really obvious to us who we trusted deeply to like bring that content to life. And hot take, I hate having meetings that we don't need to have. And so a lot of our like back and forth with guests, I match what they want. If they prepare and really want to meet with me and talk through the whole process, I do that. If they're like, I don't even need questions, I like to show up and just wing it, I still send them questions. They can look if they want to or not. But I think like as much as you can prepare behind the scenes and also like lead from their perspective first, like what do you need? How do I set you up for success? How is this opportunity a home run for you? Like as that trust has built over time, we then can have these experiences with them, that they trust us, we trust them when we offer them a keynote spot. We didn't even meet with our last two keynotes before they keynoted. We knew they were going to show up and knock it out of the park. So that might be a hot take for people out there, but it's just kind of how our tiny team operates. And it's just through trust and like authentic connection each moment that we have. So anyways, I'll let y'all jump in before I add any more, because I could bore y'all with all of my step by step, but what would y'all add to that?
I'd love to just jump in and highlight something real quick, because last week we were having a conversation where our speakers were talking about how like one of the worst things that you can do is after an event, right? Like the takeaway was like, don't ghost your attendees. And
Yeah.
I think something that you all are modeling really well is like you have year-round content creation that is taking place outside of the parameters of your event, but it's actually informing, it's helping you build relationships and better understand your speakers. It's creating a thread and a through line so that when it comes time to actually build an event and go live and launch an in-person, global experience, you have such a strong pulse on the topics and themes that matter to your industry. You have built incredible relationships and honestly just like insane credibility with like powerhouse speakers, influencers, thought leaders, practitioners, right? That like it allows you to like seamlessly integrate into your event production. So I think that's just like the reminder of the power of like syndication doesn't just happen after an event. Like everything that you're doing from a podcast perspective is actually being syndicated into your event. So it's both. So that's just something that stood out to me as you were walking us through, Julie. John and Becky, curious what you all are thinking. What's top of mind?
I think I'm going to jump in here and we have a really good question for Bianca, and I'm going to say it to the group, and then tie it into storytelling, because Bianca asked what's one of your favorite or go-to staging tactics to help set the tone and awareness for a new experience. And I swear I'm going to tie this in to storytelling. But I mean, staging is about like researching and understanding that data. It's assessing, have we talked about impact to what we did the last time we talked to them? Because we got to communicate that out before we actually launch this event. It's about mapping out your assets and saying, what do we have here? And I want to give like a pro tip that I think I missed so much in my early career that I understand now, and it's so helpful. And I want to say this to you as I like lovingly grab your face. Sorry, I'm an empath, so I say these things.
Right.
But this is not all on you.
Yeah.
The event is not on your shoulders, you and your team's shoulders alone. And let me tell you why I think that's powerful, because staging is understanding that your community and your audience is very much an asset of execution. And what I mean by that is if you can start to tell the story and tease it out of what's coming and ask questions around it and source your audience and say, what do you think about this? How have you seen this show up? And say, hey, audience, rabid fans, we're going to need your help getting this word out. Can you help us share? Can you help us amplify this message? All of a sudden, it's not just your organization pushing out the information. It's that there is a cacophony and there are many voices and many people who are really coming into this experience. And that is going to help us recruit and energize volunteers. It's going to help us activate rabid fans who can tell the story from their lens. And I think just real tactically, Bianca, like, how do you look at your audience and break them into that phase of connection that you want to sequence? You know, is this audience hanging out more on email? Is this your social media audience? They're going to have to be engaged in a different way. Are boomers? They're going to want your event invitation. They're going to want the save the date. And so sequencing all of those warming steps that are building to launch, you know, having your stewardship and reporting ready to go before the event happens so you can just drop in all that activating data is such a great thing. And the beauty of all of this is that you're culling story from the audience. It's not just what we're controlling, it's what we're offering up to people to actually be a voice and be a part of the event, whether they're in the room or not, which is a beautiful thing. This is going to create belonging. So I hope that's really helpful.
It was helpful.
That's awesome.
Thanks, Jay.
Something I
Like
want
no
to
one was
add, what
affirming you.
and Bianca, something I want to add to what Julie was saying about the power of these relationships with speakers is that, you know, now with our journey, we've had the experience to be speakers on other platforms and have been interviewed on probably 30 different podcasts at this point. And I'm not throwing shade. I'm just saying what I notice as difference is that that sacred time before a recording, after a recording, relationships literally either get built or you're like, you feel like you're like cattle being herded through. And
Yeah.
quickly in our journey, we realized while our core audience is the change maker, the nonprofit leader, you know, those type of people that have influence in an organization, we're creating content for them. Our second core audience is like the thought leader, the type of people that would want to come on our show that are shepherding other communities of people. And so, like, we have to show up with care for those relationships. And like if they feel like they're cattle and that you're just another number filling a spot, you're absolutely missing the point of like what can happen from a groundswell perspective and just building relationships and building that trust, you know? So that comes down to what kind of expectations are you putting on your speakers? I mean, if they're having to fill out their bio when it's readily available, or they're having to provide a photo that's readily available, all the steps, like how can you make it as easy as possible for someone to participate? They're giving you their time, and how can you make it an experience that they want to tell others about, you know? So I think thinking through it from their lens is really an important piece, and not rejecting the cattle vibes, right?
I was gonna
Unless
say
you're,
that.
yeah,
Sorry, no, keep going. You're on a roll. Both
no,
of
unless you're like a rancher. It was a dumb joke. Like if your
Oh,
cattle is your thing, then do that.
no, you had to get
Like
that
if
one
you're
in.
not, yeah.
No, I was just gonna say like it's super important to over prepare and oversimplify for your speakers or your podcast
Yeah.
guests. So at least for our podcast, I'll say everyone hears from me at least at the minimum a week out with like, here's all the questions that we'd like love to ask you, poke holes in it. Here's all the steps to make sure you feel good about your tech. As soon as they join in the platform, I can tell from a mile away if they're nervous. And I'm immediately like, just a reminder, this isn't live. If you want me to cut anything out after this, like that's why I'm here. And you see someone's shoulders drop. So just like be
Mhm.
human and match like who you're working with and how they're showing up. And then for our event, I think all of our panelists and everyone involved heard from me maybe 3 or 4 times leading up to it of like, here's the content, poke holes in it, here's the tech. Because my fear is that I don't want my name to pop up in the inbox and people are like, oh, spam, oh, another thing to do, another thing to do. Like when someone hears from me, from our team, like they know like, okay, she's thought about this. Here's the like 4 bullets I need to make sure that I do. And like John said, if it's something that's readily available, headshots, bios, things I can personally write, write copy for a social media post, make it super easy for them to share about it, like do all of that for them. And like, again, that's part of our brand of people like to come speak with us because they know that we're going to make it easy for them. And so take that super seriously as well. So just adding that. Over prepared.
Yeah. This is powerful. This ties into something beautifully that like one of our stances here at Session Board, which is that like a beyond the event team, you know, and beyond the event marketing team, like we believe that marketing teams in general, the greatest asset that you have is your speaker network. And it's underutilized. And right, it's like you are bringing together all of these people that have like the right experience, the right amount of expertise. They're authoritative leaders, and they bring with them the trustworthiness that your organization and brand is trying to create with your audience. And so you have these champions that bring this expertise, this level of trust that can help you build that bridge. And again, this goes back to the don't treat your speakers as transactional, like on stage, off stage, here we go, right? Like there's a transformational offer, an opportunity for us to build something deeper that actually goes again. And this is like great bridge into syndication because it's the bridge into everything that we want to do after the event ends.
Yeah.
So I think like what you all are sharing is beautifully said. And I also am just going to plug here. We had a conversation with the head of event content at Google Cloud, Mark Ferrone, and Mark talked about this concept of the last mile. And it's all about like what is happening in those final moments before a speaker goes live. How do they feel? What's their experience? How seamless is it? Like, what is their like body language and mindset? Like how has all the preparation led to this precious like 10-minute window before the mic goes hot or they step out on stage? So I linked that blog if anyone's interested in digging into this concept of the last mile. But you know, John, I think you had tapped on it a little bit, so I wanted to plug that. So time is flying. I can't believe it's already 12:40.
This is what happens when we all start talking together.
This was bound to happen, but like let's move into syndication. So, you know, you've brought together all these incredible speakers, you've created all this amazing content. Like Julie, cook. Just cook.
And I hate cooking.
Yes.
So bring us into your process. Like, how are you syndicating content to be evergreen from the event into the rest of your content engine?
Yeah, and we can always be better at this because you're looking at our whole company plus an amazing virtual assistant, Andy. And so if we had a content team of 10, I have some dreams of what we could do. But right now, we just look at everything. Like if you have an hour of content, you have 48 pieces of content because things can just live on. And I don't know about anyone else, but my attention span is like about 15 seconds at this point in my life. And so just being able to like meet audiences where they're consuming media, like someone that really loves to attend live today so they can talk in the chat, like they're getting the full experience. But there may be someone that follows this webinar and this like series and they want to see the like one clip of my one answer from this section. So that's a piece of content. So just like seeing it as a massive jigsaw puzzle is really fun. And my saving grace is using technology to make it super easy. So between Otter AI, like transcription type services, or Riverside.fm is what we've moved our like podcast and media creation to, and they're both phenomenal. They make my team of one like a team of 8, and it's amazing. And they have a new feature where you can upload like past recorded content to it. You can create AI clips from your content. They make like little 30 seconds to a minute video. You can tell them which speaker to focus on. They'll add captions to it. You can add your branding. So there's technology out there that didn't exist when we started. And I was like literally like listening to the podcast, typing people's quotes.
Julie is a fast typer.
So
a very fast
fast.
typer.
Yeah.
For better or for worse, but anyways, there's a lot of technology out there that can make this really easy. So when you're done with your event and you have anywhere from 10 sessions to 500 sessions, I don't know all different types of events that people are managing, but that's a gift of a pot of content that you can play with and build. Just know your audience of how they show up. And also, even if you don't know your audience, everyone shows up differently. There's podcasts that I know them just from their like Instagram reels, and I've never listened to a full length podcast. So
Mm-hmm.
content, like my process wise, it's really utilizing those technologies. And just a quick example of what we've referenced already. We partnered on a virtual summit with Brian a few years ago, and we created a whole new brand for the replays. We hosted a special stage. We had, by the end, 10 panel conversations that got us through the entire summer of our podcast content. Because we also were gathering 4 like epic panelists around this
Mm-hmm.
topic that we were like, this needs to live on from the 150 people that are tuned into this panel. And so being able to like reuse that and put it into our podcast and clips, like we put a whole new brand around it. Sorry, they just started construction next door, if you can hear that.
Can't hear it.
Oh, good. Thanks, Zoom. And so anyways, just being able to like be creative, add different branding to it. We could keep things fresh from the podcast season 1 4 years ago. And that's the beauty of syndication. It's a jigsaw puzzle you can endlessly play with. So I'll stop there.
Yeah, create once, syndicate forever. That's
Yeah.
or you know, you could also position that as create once, promote forever. It's just 1 hour of content is a gold mine that can feed you for years. It's brilliant.
And I'll tell you, the AI engine that Julie mentioned, I mean, we can go into Otter and say, hey, give us a paragraph, a social paragraph that summates all of this. Give me 3 of the most important points. Pull out 6 quotes for us that were deeply impactful, and it's boom, it's done. And so I just want everyone to think about syndication is just taking that one strong piece of content. It could be an impact report. We're talking about events. It could be your script, and turning it into microburst of content that can be dripped out in various mediums. And it is endless applications, and it is absolutely a hashtag working smarter, not harder hack.
That's amazing. Julie, I'm curious. I'm going to put you in the hot seat a little, but like if you were in my shoes, this webinar is going to wrap. Like what are just like tactically, like how would you syndicate this webinar today?
Ooh, hot seat. Well, you kind of already did it earlier. You said, I'm going to put all this into a blog post for you. Like that's amazing. You can do so much with it. I think the lens I always take is just like audience first. And so for anything that we've done, if I was you, I would take it and I would export it audio only. I'd add a little bumper in of you recording, like, hey, here's an overview of what you're about to hear. It was an awesome conversation hook, because anytime we have any replay, I know that at least our audience, our nonprofit professionals, they have 2 free minutes of their day. And so all of our content, we want it to be like audio on the go version and video version.
And video.
So I would immediately start with that of like, make this into a podcast type, even if you don't have a podcast, send it out. You can, like you said, build a blog around it. This is going live to LinkedIn right now. You can reshare it and say, keep the convo going. John, Becky, Julie will be in the comments answering questions. Sending it to anyone who registered that didn't show up. Doing the work for your audience, I think, is like the best thing you can do. So using that Otter and different things of like, yo, pull the top 10 takeaways and pull that. Someone doesn't even need to watch this and they can get like service from it. So
they can get the value.
I could play this game for probably 20 more minutes, but you could add it to other
Something
things.
I saw Jay do.
I don't know.
So we did a LinkedIn Live maybe a couple of weeks ago with Stacy Houston, the executive director of 6 Degrees. She just did this TED Talk launch. And so we were doing a live event helping her launch this, but also talking about BTS of like, how do you land a TED Talk? How much does it cost? Like, what are the prep stages? So Julie took that video and put it into our membership library, but spliced it into, smaller segments, because the people that joined live maybe wanted to watch all of the individual reactions. But for our members, they may just want to see, oh, I have been curious about TED Talk. Well, this clip has already been pared down to 3 minutes that you can hear what does it take to land a TED Talk. And now that lives forever in our asset library. Like, you think about content as an asset. So the different ways that you can make it consumable for your audience, like that's just adding value proposition if you're whether selling it or just like it's a way to grow your list or whatever you're doing. Like, thinking of it as an asset is a really powerful way to approach it.
And the only other thing
Can,
I'll add, and then I promise I will stop,
no, you're
is
good.
being human. Like, there's productions all around us. You can tell when something's like awkward or someone's just thrown something together. Like we witness that as people. So I always look through that lens too of like, if the entire beginning of this was us being like, hey, what's up? Drop where you're coming from, which like is so fun when you're live. I typically cut that out in a replay. It's like, if someone's pressing play, like, how does this serve them, how they're showing up right now? Not like, okay, I knocked out that hour piece of content, let me just get it everywhere. Like, you still have to customize it and make it that like really intentional experience too. So just like be human and cut out the things that might be like awkward or like clunky, even though they do happen. You can.
That's good advice. Julie, I'm guilty. So
Sorry.
I'm gonna exit stage left.
So am I. So am I. We've learned over time.
Yeah.
Amazing. I think John and Becky, can you all just we didn't really go into your membership, but your content lives evergreen for all time, like you said, in a library where people can purchase a membership and engage in your content at any time. Can you just take 2 minutes just to share more about that concept and how you've
Are we
built it?
paying you for this advertorial moment? Like, thank you so much.
No,
I
it's brilliant content syndication.
I mean, the simplest form, like, go back to like what our purpose was. We wanted to make professional development accessible to all. And so, like, think about, we've had 600 podcast conversations. We've curated hundreds of webinars and panels over the years. And so we've put it into what it feels like, almost like Netflix style, was version 1 of our content syndication. And we were watching on the back end that it's still hard for someone to show up and be like, I'm going to scroll through to find a how to build my monthly giving program. That's not a great customer experience. So we recently, over the last year, have migrated to something. Oh, Julie is fast.
If I
There you
do
go,
this,
Julie.
Man, look
can I
at
do this? Is this
her.
okay?
Now,
Super
yeah, I'm glad you
producer.
did. So now it's pulling in Julie's name. Hey, Julie, how can we help? And it's met with a search bar, because yeah, you can still go Netflix through it, but through the power of AI, it's reading every transcript, every chapter through all of our content, and you can really quickly get into whether it's an audio only podcast or a video. And you even have a bot that's trained on all the content to say, I don't have to Google this. I could say I align with We Are for Good's values and kind of the way they see the world and the type of people that are on their content. And so now you can ask intelligent questions against that content. So it's basically a GPT against our library of content. And so you can say, how do I build a monthly giving program? And it'll say, hey, do these 6 steps. And by the way, here's the videos of the 8 times that we talked about this. So check it out. So it's a blend
Awesome.
of either DIY, do it yourself kind of step through, or like just ask it to get going on whatever you're stuck on that day. And that all lives as part of our membership, which is called Impact Uprising. Our membership, we gather and grow together in community. And the backbone of it is this content, but people stay for the community. People, even on this call today, are members in that community that I'm seeing that are here because of like the relationships that come from experiencing content and conversations like this. Then you stick around with like-minded people that you can actually activate it and live it out together. So
And
come
that,
join us. We'd love to have you.
yeah, that technology is membership.io. And so it's really, really easy to use, as even as you get that pot of content at the end of your event. Like, what a gift to all participants to be like, we know that's probably really overwhelming and you missed a bunch of things. Come search for what you're looking for. And I bet one of our panels covered it. So again, just like use technology and make it easy on people, because that's what you would want someone to do for you.
It's
usually
amazing. You've taken event content, podcast content, and you're building this whole Netflix-esque media experience. You're building you are a media company, right? So it's just brilliant. And I love that you shared your screen, because just to see all of the content that's living evergreen, that's accessible, that's searchable, that's contextual, to the attendee and the member in terms of how they engage, what kind of content that they are searching for and looking for, and how it's feeding that up for them. Incredible stuff. We
Thanks,
are
man.
way over on time. Thanks everybody for sticking with
Sorry.
us. And sorry, the dog's barking in the background.
Hey, it's
Relatable.
human. We keep saying we're gonna be human, and
Yes.
that is the beauty of this moment.
We're here, but I did want to make sure that we covered the last part of your framework, which is stoking. So, right, like you've created 30 clips from your session. It's on the podcast now. It lives on YouTube. It's in your membership, right? So you have all of this content that you've created. You've created 60 pieces of content just from a 1 hour session. How are you now going into stoking? I would love you to share, like, what is stoking in your mind, and then, like, what's your process in terms of how you're leveraging that to build deeper engagement, deeper value over time.
Okay, let's talk about stoking like in it with a visual. How many times have we been in a campfire and we're like poking that
It's
fire?
like waning. Yes.
It's waning down and we're trying to get that fire to come back up. That's really what we think that we're talking about, because stoking is engagement. I mean, the worst thing that we could possibly do is have this beautiful experience and beautiful storytelling and the change and the impact that's happening, and we set it out there and we forget it. I mean, Julie calls it ghosting, posting and ghosting. It's like, we don't want to put this beautiful content out into the world without pushing it just a little bit toward engagement. And what does that look like? It means that we don't just put the content and hit post. It means whoever is in that content gets tagged, gets thanked, wherever they are in it. Because guess what? All of a sudden, tagging is going to bring other people into the conversation. It's not just your post now or your organization's post. It belongs to all of us. And then once they get sort of that alert, oh, I've been talked about, then they come into the conversation, and then all of a sudden they start to comment. And stoking isn't just about letting the content sit. It's when people start to engage with your content, you engage back and you start to see them. And we think this could be as simple as somebody saying, oh, I really love that video, or oh, I really got a lot out of it. We go in and we react to that comment. We comment back, because we're not just helping the algorithm by creating more activity. We're showing somebody that we see your comment, we value it, we're glad that you're here, and thanks for adding to the conversation. And so we respond. And sometimes, depending on the depth of how somebody connects back with us, we want to go deeper with them. And so I want to tell you about the power of the DM. Like, sliding into someone's DM right now is one of the most powerful tools that we have. And I got to give a little shout out to LinkedIn right now, because if your organization is not on LinkedIn, you are missing an incredible opportunity, because we're seeing it just really explode in growth. And it's going to give you a couple of advantages. You could tag everybody you know, your board member who spoke, your beneficiary who was a part of your video, people who were, thank the people who were on your committee to come in. I mean, you can see all of the entry points that shows that this was not just organizations A's event. It was the event of the collective. And the collective is going to carry the conversation on into their networks and into their world. Allow them to share. If they share, slide into that DM again and say thank you, and get into the conversation. So we just believe that you cannot just put great content out. You've got to bring others into the content, into the experience. Ask them questions. That's a great way to stoke. Asking questions, doing surveys, asking people to actually put some feedback into it. So yeah, it's just such an amazing way to make things feel human, to make people feel like their voice matters, their presence matters, and their influence matters. So John, Julie, feel free to jump in on that rant as I step out of my pulpit.
That's it.
Yeah, I mean, stacking them all together, you can also stage. So if you have somebody on your podcast or in your event, tell them, hey, this is going to go live on X date, so they can be a champion for it. Because I'll say we get tagged into stuff, and it may be a day that, like, I'm not even on LinkedIn. It's like if you have some pre-prep, you're going to get a lot better response. So staging the stoking is like next level if you want to really stack it together. Is that enough S's for you today? This is good.
Totally. And it's stewardship. P.S. Stoking is stewardship. There's
And
another
it
S
leads
for
to
you.
scale. Yes, it does.
Oh, gosh, we're
So much.
ridiculous.
And we're stoked on alliteration.
Yeah.
Yay.
Brilliant stuff, y'all. Thanks for hanging in a little longer. We needed more time. I feel like we could have done an hour on every stage, but
All right, we're a
here we
chatty group.
are.
Mhm.
This was brilliant. I'm gonna own something else that we talk a lot about here at Session Board is about how we're building in the open. And that goes to our
Mm,
product and getting feedback and how we want to iterate and change it and add deeper value to our customers and our sector, to like, we're here trying to build an events program, right? And I think something that I'm going to do for this is my commit to building in the open. I'm not just going to syndicate a blog of this. I'm going to do a blog about how I syndicated the content for this webinar.
Ooh,
So,
Look at you. Loving
and I
it.
think what I'm going to do is I'm going to ask you all to add inputs. So, I'll syndicate a blog, and then I'm also going to do sort of like the walkthrough tutorial of like, these are the steps I took, these are the tools I used, these are the outcomes, and maybe I could even like put it in the framework.
So
That's the
proud of
sandbox
you.
I'm playing in. But I was kind of inspired by that, where it was like, oh, like we're already
so
syndicating,
good.
right? So, y'all, so appreciate you. Thank you so much. Thank you for plugging the We Are for Good community. Also, like, if you guys could just drop your LinkedIns in the chat. I know that you love connection. You
Mm,
want to keep the conversation going. So for anyone that wants to connect with Julie, John, and Becky, please do. They're brilliant. They're active. They're responsive. As you can tell, they're kind and they create space for people. So if you want to continue the conversation with them, please do. But quickly before we go, we are also continuing the conversation ourselves into next week. So next week, I'm actually going to be presenting the Essential Guide to Speaker Training. We've had a series of conversations over the last 6 months with the leading experts in speaker training, and we've talked about content syndication. We've distilled all their key takeaways and learnings into a step-by-step impact guide on all the important key milestones and steps that you should incorporate into your speaker training. And I'm actually going to update this asset because I think the number is going to go from 12 to 14 because you all had good insights on speaker training today. So
Yay.
this ebook, it's rich, it's in depth, it's about 50 pages long. It goes live next week, and if you register, you'll be the first to access the ebook, but we're going to be walking through all the key takeaways in live event format. So I am going to follow up with everyone with a registration link to that event if you're interested. And then I am also, actually, you know what? I have the link right here, just while I navigate tabs.
Look at you activating and stoking. Making
I
it
know. We're just living.
You're staging right now. You
We're
see this? Like
staging.
he's planting the
Totally.
seeds.
This is good. And I'll also plug in early December, we have an incredibly special guest, Neil Patel, who, if
That's
any of you
awesome.
follow him on LinkedIn, it's
It's
insane.
epic.
He has almost 700,000 followers on LinkedIn.
Oh,
He's probably the leading expert in digital marketing,
Awesome.
period, exclamation point. And he's going to be talking to us about how event content teams should be thinking about their speaker networks and their event content through the lens of Google's EEAT framework and SEO. So it's going to be really good, really rich. That's coming December 4th. And I'm also going to link the registration here. Boom. We filled a full hour, y'all. Thanks so much for joining us. Thanks for spending time with us, John, Julie, Becky. So appreciate you. Thanks for your time and your contributions. And we're cheering you on.
right back at
Grateful,
you.
Brian.
For all of you guys out in the audience. Go slay
Boom.
Friends, thanks for hanging. Good
Yeah,
to see
thanks,
y'all.
Brian. Appreciate you.
Until next time. Cheers, y'all.
Bye.
Bye.